Oh my God, no, I hope that's not Lisa.
It's still a very sad case. You know, we have a young woman here who lost her life. She was robbed of her future by someone. We're hoping that this brings a small bit of comfort to her family members.
Lisa Holstead, who was 22 years old, vanished without a trace on August 12, 1986. She left behind an eerie silence. After her boyfriend told the police that she was missing, they looked everywhere for her. They had only been looking for an hour when they found Lisa's dead body in a marsh in the 10 Years Nature Park. She had been brutally killed. For years, no one knew who did it because there were no clues or suspects. Who could have done something so terrible? Why would someone want to kill a woman so young and full of life? Hello and welcome to our channel. If you are new here, please subscribe and press the bell notification. Let's have a look at the oldest cold case finally solved, Lisa Holstead's case. So, let's jump right into this puzzle without further ado. The crime happened in Green Bay, a city on the shore of Lake Michigan in the U.S. state of Wisconsin. It is the third biggest city in the state, with about 104,000 people living there. The Green Bay Packers are one of the most popular teams in the National Football League, and Green Bay has a strong football culture. The city's economy is made up of many different types of businesses, such as healthcare, education, manufacturing, and tourism. Green Bay has places like the National Railroad Museum, Bay Beach Amusement Park, and the historic downtown area that tourists can visit. In 1986, a terrible murder took place here in Green Bay. A bright-eyed girl was born on April 18, 1964. Lisa Holstead was her name. Lisa's youth wasn't easy. She was raised by a strong, resilient single mother named Judith Karen Peral Thompson, and it wasn't always easy. Frank Holstead was not in Lisa's life, but that didn't stop her from being a star. She had a curious mind and creative energy from a young age, and these traits shaped the rest of her life. She had two older sisters who loved her, Deborah, who was 3 years older, and Susan, who was 2 years older. They were always there to listen to her or let her cry on their shoulder. Lisa felt safe and loved with them in a way that was hard to find elsewhere. Stephen Holstead, who was 5 years older than her, was her guardian. He always looked out for his little sister and made sure she felt safe and loved. Even though they had trouble with money because they were raised by a single mother, their love for each other never changed. Judith worked very hard to take care of her kids, and her love for them was endless. Lisa Holstead loved to ride horses and was also an artist who liked to draw in her free time. But her life took a surprising turn when she got pregnant at age 17 and had her beloved son Jeremy in 1981. Lisa was a loving and loyal mother to her son, even though she had to deal with a lot of problems. She worked hard to make sure Jeremy had the best life she could give him. As she raised Jeremy on her own, she showed how kind, outgoing, and creative she was, just like her mother had done for her and her brothers. Lisa Holstead was a brave and strong woman who did things on her own. Even though life with her family was nice, she longed for something else. So, she had the courage to move across the country to Los Angeles in 1981 to follow her dreams. After some time, she understood that what she really wanted for herself and her son, Jeremy, was a stable, quiet life. She found that in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where they moved in 1982 and set up house. Lisa never went to college, but she was eager to keep learning. Between 1983 and 1984, she took a goal-oriented, non-credit adult learning course at the Northeastern Wisconsin Technical Institute. Lisa was only 22 years old when she went back to Green Bay in 1986, but she had already done a lot. With her now 5-year-old son by her side, she was ready to face any problems that came up in this new part of their lives. She had even found love again with a guy named John Sod, with whom she shared a nice home in Green Bay. The couple did simple things like go fishing and play darts together. They also had an eel and a bird named Herbie as pets, which was kind of strange. Lisa's love for her family and her enthusiasm for life was clear in everything she did, and she loved spending time with her loved ones. But fate had a cruel twist in store for her, and on August 12, 1986, her bright future was sadly cut short. Lisa and John went on a late-night trip to Wisconsin. The moon was high in the sky. Lisa and John seemed to be having a great time as they played darts game after game, which showed how competitive they were. But as that night came to an end, tensions started to rise, and the alcohol seemed to be taking its toll. At 2:30 a.m., when they were on their way home, the car stopped at the corner of Mason and Taylor Streets. Lisa and John were arguing, so she opened the door and went outside into the cool night air. After the fight with John, she was angry and upset, and she needed to clear her mind. She told John that she was going to walk home and that he should go rest. He hoped she'd come back soon so they could make up and leave this fight in the past. John's worry turned into dread as the hours went by and the sun started to rise over the quiet town of Green Bay. Still, Lisa hadn't come back, and he couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was very wrong. He looked all over the streets and alleyways, calling her name, but no one answered. He went to the police station out of desperation and told them she was lost. His heart was full of fear and doubt. Just an hour after John told the police that she was missing, 2 workers in the Kennyhurst Nature Park made a terrible find. As the workers walked along the riverbed, it was just another day. Something caught their attention. It was a hand sticking out of the water. They stopped their truck at the water's edge because they were interested. What they found there would stay with them forever. The dead body of a woman lying half naked, as if she had been thrown away like trash. They called the police right away, and officers from the Green Bay Police Department were there within minutes. When they got there, they saw a terrible scene. The body of a dead woman was found in a swamp. It was surrounded by tall reeds and murky water. The officers tried to keep the area safe so they could look for clues. As the officers looked through the marsh for anything that could help them figure out who the woman was, they found a small piece of fabric sticking out of the murky water. They waded through the marsh quickly to get the fabric, and when they looked more closely, they found an ID card hidden in the back pocket of a pair of pants. Then, they were able to confirm that the victim was Lisa Holstead. When they got close to her body, they saw marks on her neck that showed she had been choked. This was a sad sign that she had been killed on purpose, so the case was ruled a murder. The autopsy report gave a horrible description of how Lisa died. Her blood alcohol level was a shocking 0.25%, which was much higher than the legal limit at the time. The autopsy also showed that she had multiple cuts that left her body covered in blood, which is a sight that could make even the bravest person feel sick to their stomachs. Worse, the medical examiner's report said that the main cause of her death was a horrible sexual attack. The only thing that gave them hope was the alien DNA they had taken from the body of the victim. For the cops, finding the DNA was like finding a needle in a haystack. They knew it was a key piece of evidence, but they couldn't connect it to a suspect. The small sample was carefully put away, just like a valuable gem. The detectives hoped that one day, technology would catch up to the potential of this evidence and give them the answers they so badly needed. The news of Lisa's death during her probe spread like wildfire, leaving a wake of sadness in its wake. John was devastated by the death of the woman he loved, filled with guilt over their last fight, and haunted by the thought that he could have done more to protect her. Her family went through a lot of pain and confusion. The cops started looking into it right away and talked to everyone who might have had a reason to hurt Lisa. Detectives checked out every lead, talked to every suspect, and went back to the crime scene many times. Over the next few years, nothing seemed to blow the case wide open. They even went back to the drawing board more than once, trying to piece together any possible clues or leads that could lead them to Lisa's killer. However, none of their efforts led anywhere. The case seemed to get even harder to figure out as time went on. The evidence got worse, and possible culprits were no longer in sight. The case was finally filed away and sat on a shelf collecting dust for more than 30 years. But in 2020, after the breakthrough case had been closed for 34 years, Detective David Graff from the GBPD revived it and took charge of the investigation. This gave people hope again. He and his team looked through the old case files with dogged purpose, and they saw a small vial in the back of the storage unit that had been forgotten. Inside was the clue that would help solve the case: the DNA of the person who did it. It was time to bring in the latest gear for forensics. He went to Othram, a business that specializes in forensic genetic genealogy, and was one of the first in this field, to find out who killed her in a brutal way. This cutting-edge technology would not only give more information about the suspect, but it would also give interesting details about the killer's family. With this new information, the agent was able to finally figure out what was going on in this old case. In June 2020, the DNA was sent to a lab to be looked at, and when the results came back, the Green Bay Police Department had a lot of information about the person they were looking for. With each piece of information, the DNA analysis gave the cops. They got closer to finding the killer. The police started looking carefully at the family trees of the person's distant cousins. They put together a web of links piece by piece until they had made 10 to 15 different family trees. As the case went on, they looked through databases and websites to find groups of people who might know the victim. After a lot of looking and digging, they found a group of people who lived in other states. When they followed their trail, they found a link to Wisconsin, which led them to Green Bay, which is where the horrible murder happened. The cops found a family member who had lived in Green Bay in 1986, the same year the crime was committed. After a lot of work, they finally found a suspect whose DNA might match the sample that was taken at the crime scene. The breakthrough had been a long time coming. Luke Griffin was the name of the man, and the police found out that he had a history of hurting women, including strangling them. They also found out that he had just been released from prison after spending time on a terrible crime called second-degree sexual assault. The thing that surprised them the most was that Luke had been convicted of a sexual attack in 1981, which hadn't come up during the first investigation. The cops seemed to have missed a very important clue that had been right in front of them the whole time. Luke's past finally caught up with him, though, thanks to the new technology of forensic genetic genealogy and the hard work of Detective David Graff and his team. When the agents had a suspect in their sights, they knew they had to be sure of everything before making an arrest. They had to compare Luke Griffin's DNA to the description from the scene of the crime. So, in September 2020, the cops went on an exciting mission to find Luke Griffin, their main suspect, who had moved to the city of Racine. The police in Green Bay, Racine County, the FBI, and the DCI all worked together to keep an eye on Griffin, trying to find evidence against him. Luke was being looked for, and the police weren't going to let him get away. They followed him to a different town in Wisconsin and watched every step he took. They were watching him on September 18, 2020, when they saw him throw away some beer cans in a bin and carelessly drop a cigarette but on the ground. He had no idea that these small things would be the cause of his downfall. The cops quickly picked up the things that had been thrown away and sent them back to the lab for more DNA tests. On September 29, 2020, the findings came back, and the government was thrilled. The DNA was an exact match for what was found at the scene of the crime more than 30 years ago. On October 28, 2020, around 6 a.m., Luke was led out of his house as the sound of handcuffs being put on could be heard. As the police car took Luke to Brown County Jail, his neighbors peered out from behind their blinds and whispered to each other. Luke sat in the interrogation room with a stone face as he said he had nothing to do with the killings. Luke's resolve started to waver as the questions got tougher, and he finally admitted that he had a sexual encounter with the victim. But he said that his memory of that night was at best hazy. He blamed the fact that he was high on drugs and booze for his confusion. As the details of the crime came out, it was clear that Luke's drinking had messed up his memory, and he couldn't remember what happened the night Lisa died. The suspect, who had been hard to find, was now in arrest. It was time for his trial in 2021. As Luke Griffin walked in with guards on either side, the courtroom was full of reporters, the victim's family, and people who just wanted to watch. As he sat down at the defendant's table, everyone looked at him. As the trial started and the prosecution showed their proof, Luke's future was in doubt. The jury paid close attention and paid attention to every detail of the case. Luke told the jury about what happened on that fateful night in 1986. He said that he had just stopped at McDonald's and then taken a route that happened to pass by where Lisa's body was later found. But with every word he said, the act he had done seemed to weigh more heavily on him. As the trial went on, the proof against him kept piling up until the jury had no choice but to decide. Luke was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and his bail was set at $1 million. After a long and hard legal fight, Luke made the shocking decision on January 27, 2023, to plead not guilty to the charge of homicide by reckless behavior. Again, the courtroom was tense as the judge read out the decision. One of Luke's lawyers, Peter Hain, argued for a lighter sentence because Luke was sick and had already been in jail for 2 years. But Judge Timothy Hinkfuss didn't care about Haynes' request. He said Luke's lack of accountability and refusal to take responsibility had only hurt Holstead's family more. Hinkfuss went on to say that the laws in place at the time of the crime limited the term he could give, and that current Wisconsin law only allows a maximum of 40 years for homicide by reckless conduct, which is a Class C felony. People in the crowd all let out a gasp when Luke was found guilty of first-degree intentional murder. It was a sad win for the prosecution, which had worked hard to get justice for the family of the victim. Luke Griffin, who was 67 years old, was sentenced to 10 years in prison on March 27, 2023. This was the most time he could get in prison under the law in 1986. Luke could get out of jail after serving 2/3 of his sentence under the old rule. He also got credit for 2.5 years of time he had already spent in jail. This means he could be out of jail in 4.5 years and could get parole in less than 6 months. Since 2020, lawyers had been fighting hard to bring the case to a close. When he handed down the sentence, Brown County Circuit Court Judge Timothy Hinkfuss said that Lisa Holstead's murder was a horrible thing to do, but he had to follow the rules that were in place at the time of the crime. Brown County District Attorney David Lassie said that the maximum term was way too light, but he still wanted it to be given because of how bad the crime was and how it affected the victim's family. He didn't take responsibility and stayed away from the law for 34 years, Lassie said. This has had a big effect on the family, the judge said. During the meeting, the family members' sadness was clear, and they made it clear that no sentence could bring back their beloved Lisa. When 5 of Holstead's family members stood up to tell the judge what they knew, the hall was full of emotion. Their voices trembled with grief and anger when they recounted the pain and trauma they had endured for over 3 decades. One sister, a brother, a niece, a son, and a granddaughter all spoke passionately, sharing the impact the long cold case had on their family. They described the void left by their beloved sister, mother, and grandmother, and expressed their disappointment with the maximum sentence available. Stephen Holstead's Lisa's brother's voice was thick with emotion as he addressed the man who had caused his family so much pain. "The pain it caused our family cannot even be described to you," he said, his eyes fixed on Luke. "Many tears I've thought about Lisa all these years. Every day spent 377 days since you murdered her." They painted a picture of a kind and loving woman, a devoted mother to her young son. The family spoke of Lisa's creative spirit, her love for art and music, and her trusting and outgoing nature. They shared that they had few photos of Lisa and no videos, but one family member brought a framed picture of her to the stand and another played an audio recording of her singing as a child. The case of Lisa Holstead is a testament to the power of perseverance and the remarkable advances in forensic technology that have been made in recent years. While it may have seemed like an unsolvable mystery for decades, the tireless efforts of law enforcement and the use of cutting-edge forensic techniques ultimately led to justice being served. What sentence do you think Luke deserves for his crime? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and if you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, stay safe, and thank you for watching.